Hey, Podnuthians. Welcome to Linux for the Rest of Us, episode 231. My name is Door to Door Geek. This is a podcast all about Linux, nothing about enterprise Linux because that's drab, boring, mundane. Interesting tangent. Mundane, I believe, was the origin of the world meant everything in the universe. We changed that from being everything glorious in the universe to being mundane, boring. Weird how language changes over time. Something else that changes over time is me and Bruce. How are you doing, Bruce?
Doing pretty well tonight. How about yourself?
Doing fairly well. I will say just a brief catch up from last week on the sports ball thing. Number one, congratulations. I believe your team won.
Did they?
Well, I know a fan won because they almost got hit by a train after leaving the stadium, I believe, and then a BART employee dragged them off of the subway track, literally like a split second before they got ran over.
Well, let's see. Oh, then we're talking about Raiders Chargers. I guess you're right. We beat them by 2 points. I'd like to celebrate it, but it's the Raiders and they beat the Chargers. I couldn't shrug my shoulders any harder right now.
Well, I'll just say, being formerly in the having a team in the same division as the Raiders, I did enjoy any time we beat somebody in our own conference, but it really wasn't spectacular because we didn't have great teams, it seemed like.
One of the things that I do hate most about today's NFL is parody, because it is only a letter away from being parody. And again, when growing up and enjoying football of the 70s, for me it was much better. Of course I can say that the Raiders were freaking dominant then, but as time has gone on, maybe not so much. But I really don't like the fact that any team can win any day. That's just garbage to me. That's why sometimes I look at New England and I don't hate them as much, but again, they are the Patriots too.
Yeah, I mean, I don't like them because they're the Patriots, but I liked the fact that I could ignore football for a full 2-3 years, turn the TV on, and I know what to expect when they're on TV. And I was correct last week, I will say, before the game started between the Baltimore Ravens, Patriots. I said, for the Ravens to win, they're literally going to have over 30 points. And they're basically just going to need to shock and awe the Patriots D in just doing things that they're not accustomed to. And the Patriots did in fact lose. I was kind of impressed.
You know what? I have to tell you, I wasn't surprised. Jim Harbaugh always finds a way to beat those guys. And, they put together a good game plan. They executed. Their defense has always been tough. And, again, I think when New England gets a little full of themselves, they need a game like Baltimore, because the thing is that it shows them that, hey, you take a team lightly in this league and you do find yourself losing. And better for them to lose in the middle of a season right now where they'll clearly win their division. But you know what? It's something to think about when to the playoffs.
Yeah, and I will say he reportedly did say before the season, this team is built to beat Pittsburgh and to beat the Patriots. But I mean, here's my thing. I love how blindly ignorant everyone seems to be when fandom comes into play. And what I mean is, and we're going to get back to the next people, but we watched the football game and I'm thinking to myself, we've seen this show over and 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 over again for 40 years in the NFL. A quarterback comes up. He does things differently than the average quote-unquote quarterback. He has different talents and abilities than the average quote-unquote quarterback. But then seemingly 99% of the time, within a year or two, the rest of the league then has him figured out. And then he turns into a perfectly mundane quarterback all over again. And that's what I think is going to happen to this guy in Baltimore, where less than 18 months from now, people aren't even going to know his name anymore.
Oh, that's actually a bold statement. I'm not so sure about that, but we'll see. I hope, because he is an exciting quarterback. I mean, there are folks that already have that tag around their neck, and we're looking at Jameis Winston in Tampa Bay. Holy cow, his days are certainly numbered, as they should be. He's had plenty of time to blossom, but boy, makes the dumbest decisions on the field.
Right, and that's why I say what I said about this guy. The odds are, he's going to need a lot of things to go right in order for him to continue to be a superstar for the next 3-4 years or whatever. It's not easy. He needs to make all the right choices, number one, but he also needs all the things to go his way, like no injuries. So I think the odds are against him. We'll see what he does. I still am completely disinterested when I watch a football game, because the penalties and the way that the players have to tippy-toe around everything is kind of not enjoyable to watch.
Well, and I'll leave it with this one last thing, too. What really surprises me, though, are teams that, for whatever reason, have lost their magic overnight, and I don't know how to explain it. For example, the Atlanta Falcons. Oh, my God. They have not been the same team after they took themselves out of the Super Bowl against the Patriots. That team has not put it together since. And then another team that seems to have what happened to the Rams? I mean, these guys were supposed to be the next world beaters out there, but holy cow, they look like they're zombies now.
Yeah, it's like mojo just vanished from them.
Well, anyway, we get to the viewer mail. I will tease something for next week's show as well. I went to the Boston Security Summit this past Wednesday, which was really interesting. A couple of things that I think I'm looking forward on reporting with a little bit more coherence is how security is using AI. I know it's a buzzword, and I hate it when that happens, but when I see it applied in such a unique way, I am blown away by it. So I'll give you more details on that. And then a new Chromebook that's coming out that is virus proof, and the reason for that is that it can't write to the system files on this OS. It does a quick hardware check on boot up, which takes all of 6 seconds, and if there's one wrong in that chain, meaning the motherboard's not the same, a chip has changed, any aspect of the hardware has changed, the OS is going to know it, and it will refuse to boot up. So I'll look forward to giving you guys the details on that next week.
Yeah, that's been, I'll say this, that's been in the Chrome operating system for a little while. I don't think every Chromebook does it, though. And I will say, because you need dedicated chips for this to happen. Yeah, it does checksums during boot processes along the way. It actually does 3 of them, I believe. And if any of them are inconsistent, it basically nukes and paves that part of the operating system. In the short of it, to the Linux weenie out there, the basic Chromebook, I want to say, has an average of between 8 and 14 partitions on their hard drive, where stuff is isolated and separated out. And the beautiful thing, I hate to say it like this, about the Chrome OS is once you sign in, it syncs your history, it syncs your bookmarks, it syncs your extensions, it syncs all of these things. So even if it does a nuke and pave, when it comes back to the fresh OS, it takes less than 2 minutes typically for it to download all the extensions and all the configuration and give you back your normal experience. There's a lot of things that Chrome OS does really right. It's just sad that it's not the type of system that other people have been able to also use.
Well, Chromebook is also, I think, limited by its hardware, which, this is something that has plagued the Chromebook and then the early round of the netbooks. The netbooks I could never understand. I want a 3.5-inch screen with a processor that could barely open up a document, but it will give you all the space to support all the porn downloads you could want.
You had me at porn. I will say to the people who are watching the video on YouTube, right here next to me is my Triple E Asus PC, which is like 3 times thicker than the average phone today. This thing is gigantic in comparison's sake. The beautiful thing about a Chromebook is it's so like finely spec'd to only do what it needs to do, which is run a browser. As long as you don't do insane things in the browser, your normal 250-ish Chromebook will do everything you need. If you really are a heavy user, if you go up to $400 in a Chromebook, you will always be satisfied, is what I will say. I've owned multiple Chromebooks. I had the original CR48 Chromebook flips, Dell's like business editions. They all just run really surprisingly well. And every time somebody says that they, what kind of a laptop should I get? I literally first question out of my mouth is, well, can you tell me why a Chromebook wouldn't meet your needs? Because it will cost a lot less money. It's a lot more secure. You don't got to worry about Windows viruses. So let's first try to rule this out.
Yeah, and for me though, the one big stickler is because I come from the past. I like to hook up my printer via USB instead of wireless. That's the biggest problem for me in Chromebooks. But it's such a minor one. There are ways around it. You can obviously, set up cloud printing, which of course would send the print job up to Google's cloud and then ultimately back down to Earth and, print on your local printer. But I don't think Google really needs to see everything I print.
Yeah, I will say that has been a long ongoing gripe about Chromebooks. There is ways, I will say this, there is ways in Chrome OS you can wirelessly connect locally to printers. And there are ways you can even, I want to say, Bluetooth connect in Chrome OS to local printers. But to have a dedicated USB cable to go from a Chromebook to a printer, I do believe you need to have the education version of Chrome OS in order to get that done. And it's a tangential thing. We were talking about security. Google, Chrome OS. Here's one of their things. It was the very last link in the email I sent you, Bruce, which apparently I might not be. Oh, there it is. Okay. Which is we've heard of from Google. We've heard of Titan Key. And I've literally seen it now because I've been in a couple meetings with Google representatives, and I love being in meetings with Google representatives. It gives me a chance to punch them right in the face because they expect to be surrounded by stupid people because, typically they are. The Google Security Titan Key, they said, is proof how they can do security and prevent all hacks, prevent all kinds of leaked passwords and everything. They haven't had a single person's device or network be exploited once they did this Titan Key, which is nothing more than a secure USB token. It's a different type of ID. But on the EE Times and other people have reported, Google is looking at creating what they call a silicon root of trust, which is a very fancy way basically of saying Google is looking at helping people make dedicated chips geared towards security in the open Titan model is what they call it. I love companies that really have nothing to win except for just name recognition by pushing these kind of open technologies, and especially dedicated chips towards security, because physical security is always the game changer when it comes to these kind of things. And even like with the Chromebook, if you try to even manipulate the operating system locally, you're going to lose, even though you have physical access to it. This Open Titan is trying to give that kind of basic security to all kinds of devices as well. And I honestly want this kind of thing to be successful.
Well, it's interesting we're going down this road too because two of the talks during the conference dealt with zero trust, which is setting up your IAM or identity management system to actually do checks on the platform and what's coming in. And it's interesting because it's basically changing the way we authenticate to our applications now. So there's a lot of work on this, and it's funny you mentioned the part about where Google treats people like they're idiots. The gentleman that actually was giving us the demonstration, uh, you would have sworn, had there been an user in the crowd, he would have sought this guy out just to murder him in public. I have never seen a group or a person so dedicated to vilifying the end user. It was almost embarrassing. But anyway, I digress. Actually, before we go too much further, should we hit up the letter for listener?
Oh yeah.
All right, I'll do the honors. Since apparently it's the thing I want to do. um, Basically, this one comes from Rain. It says, "Kind hosts, I just wanted to expound what you said in regards to podcasters not mentioning they listen to other podcasts. It always rubbed me the wrong way when podcasters pretend like other podcasts do not exist and are reluctant to mention names any unless it relates directly to them. Maybe it's just me, but I've always believed that podcasting, especially in the Libre software space, is all about community. It was not for podcasters sharing other podcasters. I would not have found some of my favorite shows I look forward to every week, this show included. Also, Dor, I would like to apologize for never emailing before now. You were absolutely right when you said people should write into shows they listen to for a few episodes before. It's the only way for things to grow. Hopefully you will be able to make it to the Ohio Linux Fest next year. It is always a treat. Rain."
Very cool. Very cool. Thank you very much, Rain. Yeah, I will say, A, why don't you tell us some other podcasts that you listen to, Rain? B, I like live, breathe, and bleed podcast. And what I mean by that is literally I subscribe to over 150 podcasts. On the average day, I listen to anywhere from 20 to 36 hours worth of podcast every day. So that's what I do. I mean, I don't watch TV. I don't watch movies. I don't watch Marvel this. I don't watch any of that. Cops. I don't watch none of that. I don't watch news. It's all garbage. But like right after the show last week, me and Bruce were just, finishing up chatting. And then one of the things that I mentioned to him, just because that's what I do, was a podcast called You Are Not So Smart. I feel like if I don't tell people about interesting things that I listen to, then why am I listening to them?
Oh, I love the podcast. Actually, after looking through it, I love the approach. And, it's one of those things where, yeah, it's definitely self-deprecating, but I mean, not deprecating, but the word I'm looking for, self-effacing, I guess. Very humble in the approach of it. And I like those podcasts, especially when you learn things that you would never have really thought of, unless, of course, you stumbled upon it like by accident. But this was a great call. So, yeah, if folks get a chance to, I suggest it. If you want something that's not work safe or even PC, I would suggest Legion of Skanks.
Legion of Skank, that's a good name. I will say that. Yeah, and I will say this: You're Not So Smart. I don't want to say it's self-insulting because it really isn't. It's just honest, and the honest truth is, the average person has average intelligence, and we're all just average people. There are certain things I know that other people don't know. That doesn't make me smart because there are things that everyone else knows that I don't know. That doesn't make me stupid. It just makes me average.
Now, I wanted to follow that up because I thought you actually had a. Oh, here it is. Your first contribution to open source imposter syndrome.
Yeah. Imposter syndrome is a very, I'll say, interesting thing. One of the things that I don't think that we do well as a community is set realistic expectations for people. Um, we make it sound like everything is so easy, everything is so simple. What is what is wrong with you kind of mentality. And this was a really good link about how when this person got into Linux, they had a very difficult time understanding why they had such a difficult time um, contributing to open source. And it's because um, I want to say the actual cognitive bias that goes on is called the curse of knowledge. And with the curse of knowledge, we take for granted that other people know things that we know, even though we learn things through experiences, like how to go through a ecosystem, whether it be GitHub or whether it be Bugzilla or other ecosystems. We had to learn how to go through those systems, but after we learn how to go through those systems, we just assume everyone knows how to go through those systems, which makes onboarding, is the word I'll use for new people, not easy.
Well, I also think it's how they go, how some of the other distros are too, because I honestly believe that if you're setting up a distribution and you are expecting the public to use it, I would expect you to have one who would act as kind of a liaison to the project, who is open, who is readily available to the public for any questions they may have, and actually ease them into the project. Because, for example, yeah, I got hepped up on the fact that, CentOS 8 was coming out, and I was figuring, you know what? I'm going to do something different this. I'm really going to make it different. I'm going to contribute this time. So what I did is I went to their page just to see how I could help out, and they list all these different things. The problem is this, I can't code. I don't do it. I can learn it, which I should, but it's the entry levels into these that makes it so difficult, because there is no way to ease on it. For example, they say that they're okay with folk with documentation. It's like, that's fine. Where do you start? Those are the things that I think make it really difficult for the average person to feel they can adequately contribute. I mean, money is one thing too, and of course you can't overlook that, but I genuinely think there are a lot of people, like, when I first all got into this, it was, how can I help? And over the years, I almost just said, you know what? They clearly don't need my help. I'm not interested. I'm not going to bother anymore. And I think that has to be corrected somewhere. There have been some wonderful projects over the years that have tried to address that. I believe, what is the one Sheesh Loria opened up, Patch. That was one, but that started to turn a little bit over the years too. So, I mean, again, these are. I don't know what the answer is right now.
Well, I'll say, like, the only constant is change with everything. One thing that I think a lot of organizations, people do extremely poorly is onboarding. Onboarding is under a appreciated talent. The people who are really good at onboarding, if I'm talking like trains and transport, they're the people who are always standing by the door to get people on the train. They're not working on the engine. They're not working in the boiler room. They're not doing anything underneath the train or on top. They're just standing by the doorway, which means that they don't actually understand everything going on the train. They just focus on onboarding. And that is not an easy task. And honestly, it's an almost thankless task. If we in open source were better at onboarding, then we need to have people who are dedicated to not understanding how to code, not understanding how to do documentation, not understanding how to make ISOs, not understanding how to get funding, not understanding how to make Git repositories or anything like that, but just understanding of how to be nice and cordial to somebody, to welcome them in, to discuss with them how they could help, and then know who to point them to. And that's all that person needs to know. That's not an easy thing to do. Onboarding, I think, is one way that we in open source can differentiate ourselves from other industries, because there is no onboarding onto Microsoft or Oracle. No. You go for an interview, and then you have to work your butt off, and you have to learn everything on your own, or pay somebody to teach you how to learn the thing. And even then, you have to basically pay with blood, sweat, and tears to be accepted in those inner circles. With open source, we need to make it easier than that.
Oh no, and I agree. Now I do know there had been some attempts in the past, because one of the distros, I can't remember if it was Fedora, had something called Front Desk, and that was everybody who comes into the distro goes to them, and then they direct traffic. But again, I'm not sure what happened to that. And maybe that's actually something I could look at next week as well. I should check in with each one of the. I'll grab just a handful of distros, because obviously, if I try to do all of them, we don't have time for all 300 active ones. So let me see what I can come up with, and I will report back.
Yeah, there's definitely a whole lot of them. I will say, if people out there know of any organization involving computing, technology, accessibility, infrastructure, floss, operating systems, anything that does good onboarding in air quotes, let us know. And I do think you're right. I do think it was Fedora that had Front Desk, and I don't know what happened to it, but I haven't heard about it, I'll say, for like 4 years. We need to find ways to share correct onboarding procedures, because it isn't getting any easier with time, because there's always new generations of people who just don't know nothing, but then they hear something and they want to know more, and we have to make it easier for them to find their way.
Now, you mentioned accessibility, and I wanted to very quickly go off on a quick tangent at work. I had training for the last days, and so the first day of training, I went into the wrong classroom, but I sat down instead of making noise just to watch it, and it happened to be a training about accessibility and making your web designs, more accessible to the outside world. And the things that I saw in there would make Jonathan roll over in his grave. He's not dead, but just the things that they promoted with JAWS and all of this stuff, making they'll be able to be active participants in the workforce. I think somebody needs to show them what the real numbers are, and how even the most qualified people, they don't get hired. That's the biggest barrier I think a lot of people with disabilities really face, and that has to change.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And I will say, I'm not important at my job, is the way that I put it. I've made it a point to not be important in my job. My job security comes that I give everything away. And I could die tomorrow, and everything I did will keep running. I don't want to be that guy. They need me. They really need me. I don't want to be that guy. But like last week, I made it very clear to a team of executives that Domino's Pizza lost a very critical lawsuit, and I believe it was Supreme Court that ruled on this, that stated everything public facing on the public internet needs to be ADA compliant, which means if someone is blind, they have to be able to navigate your website and function with it. If they, can't use their arms and legs, we have to have systems in place for them to be able to use the computer. If they're deaf, we have to be able to, there's all these things we have to make sure that are on our public facing website as a government institution, or else we will be held accountable. And then I stated, the whole kicker is, with accessibility, to be accessible just means to be not incompetent when you make your web pages. Be complete when you make them. Do your due diligence to dot your I's, cross the T's, and put in things called alt text. And then you're like 90% of the way there. And that's all you got to do.
Right. All right. Well, I didn't mean to hijack it. I'll tell you what. Why don't we start back at the top of our list and begin our journey for the rest of the show. So one of the things you'd sent me was the link to the emerging OS, which is Kai OS, the light operating system for smart feature phones. And of course, the one they're using here is I'm going to guess it's the Geo phone, the JIO phone, and the Nokia, which never dies, 8110.
Yeah, see, I never heard of this, is what I'm going to say. But I honestly, I almost heard about it, is what I'm going to say. On Android and iOS applications, there is an application called Xender, Xender. Xender. You load the application, and then what you find out is it literally has in excess of 10 million installs all over the world. What it is, it's an application that lets you easily transfer anything from phone to phone, even if it's an installed application, as long as it's not, guarded by a whole bunch of restrictions. You can literally be out in the middle of nowhere, okay, with no cell reception at all, and walk up to somebody and say, you have an Android phone, I have an Android phone, here, let me send you this application. And you can literally transfer installed applications from one to another, or media, or text files, or whatever, right there in the interface. And right in the interface, one of the things it said was, send this to a Kai phone. And I'm like, what the hell's a Kai phone? So then I go and look it up. KAIOS. It's basically, not in the first world kind of phone. JIO is the hardware manufacturer, it looks like. And it's a true, is the only way I can put it, a true Linux-based phone. Hard stop. Okay. Everyone talking about the Purism phone being the first Linux phone. Congratulations. You're an idiot. Congratulations. You're a moron, and you're completely ignorant about everything going on outside of your filter bubble of weirdness. And by weird, I mean W period, E period, I period, R period, D period, which means Western, educated, industrial, rich, democratic. You're in that bubble. Everybody outside that bubble has had a Linux phone for a while. You're so stupid, people out there. I'm really tempted to try to get one of these phones just to play with it because it has Linux on it. Because Bruce said, he doesn't have a smartphone. And honestly, the next generation of smartphones are going to have a lot to compete with because the Linux, quote unquote, smartphones are starting to make headway. And I'm really interested to see in 2 to 3 years where these phones are going to be at, because I'm pretty sure that their functionality is going to, I don't want to say be competitive, but they're actually going to start to meet people's needs.
Well, one of the things that I was impressed with, that I did click the link to go to the site just to see what it is, and there's a like a minute 30-second video explaining what their goals are, and I love it. I love the philosophy, what they're trying to do. They're trying to be the great equalizer in this. They're targeting some of the poor countries that may not have the best phone infrastructure, but it's allowing them to act as, gives them the ability to, share out documents, just communications is just vitally important in these places. And for a place that's not built to handle this kind of infrastructure, you have a device that actually acts as sort of an equalizer to offset the shortcomings of your surroundings. And, this is one of the reasons why I think maybe somebody will get it one day, that the more inclusive you are, the more chance you have of actually, let's face it, a lot of folks are just trying to make money on this. But, I think the idea here is, get people hooked up first, then money should follow afterwards. I like what they're trying to do.
Well, I'll say I agree with you. A huge percentage of people out there are literally just trying to make money. But I believe And this is a pure cognitive bias. If you want to know more about cognitive biases, look up "You're Not So Smart," and they'll fill you in. I believe we live in honestly a special time where, yes, there are more billionaires than ever. Yes, capitalism is, pretty rampant right now. But I also believe we also have the highest number of people right now trying to do what they consider to be the greater good. Um, and getting the other people, in air quotes, connected is a very, very important thing. The two ways you can easily measure a person's success in life or a culture's success in life is twofold. One, how educated are the women in the culture? That is a definite indicator of how successful that culture is going to be, how much freedom they have, and how much riches they will obtain. But the second measure is how much do they communicate with others? How much are they in isolation? Getting people connected with these devices, smart devices, is how we can get the other, 3 billion people up to basically our speed. And I'm a firm believer, the more people that have access to what I have access to is better for everybody in the end. And without sounding dumb, I literally did not watch the video, and I said to Bruce when I saw this link, here's how they're going to get the next billion people connected. And I watched the video and it says, here's how the next billion people are going to get connected. And I love competition. I love disruptive competition. And this to me looks like a really kind of thing where if they just go slow and steady with this KaiOS and with their level of hardware, what they're going to find is a lot of people's needs can be met, even if you don't have $1,000 phone running a proprietary operating system with closed source binary blobs on it that allow other federal governments ease of access right into your living room kind of thing. So I want to see this type of thing just be more and more successful. And I want to find out if it's at all compatible on US networks, because if it is, I'm literally tempted to try to get one.
Well, my main concern too is the applications that get put on it, because I've got a device here at home, a Lenovo tablet that I got 4 years ago, actually almost 5. It works fine. It's powered. The battery life is great. It still gets internet connection. I can barely use any applications anymore because the OS is long outdated. So I think that's the one challenge I hope they figure out. A way to carry applications to the versions as time goes on, and hopefully it doesn't. It's not a remarkable change over time.
Yeah, and I would hope this has some okay browser support is the way I would put it, because even if it has just okay browser support, then you should be able to run a lot of things. And it does mention UC browser, which I do believe is on multiple platforms. I do believe it's a Chromium based browser. And I say this because the real thing is next week I'm going to make sure to let Bruce know that when the Pine phone goes up for pre-order, Pine phone is $100. I believe at the peak it was $125, but I think it's $100 5.6 inch smartphone, but it's running Linux, pure Linux on it. They're going to pre-order next week. I don't believe it's actually going to be shipped till maybe January. But it's the kind of thing I really do think it's going to be insanely popular. I just want disruption when it comes to these devices.
Well, I'm also going to have to check my AARP membership to make sure that I'm eligible for it.
I understand. One of the things I wanted to take out of order really quick, Bruce, was you also mentioned last week about wanting to get into the Raspberry Pi type ecosystems, but I was hoping you didn't, because I actually want to cut you off on it, because down below, like 3 or 4 links deeper, there was a link there to Diet Pi. And this is a very interesting distribution. I'll put it this way. it's a Debian-based distribution with a lot of polish on top of it. And when I say polish on top of it, I don't mean graphical prettiness on top of it, but functionality on top of the base operating system. If you go to dietpie, dietpie.com, sorry. And then if you just go to like the software features, what you'll see is it's a pretty long list of software that you can very easily one-click, quote unquote, install into this ecosystem. And what you'll see is under the features, DietPie software, you will see a lot of software ranging from, of course, your normal like desktops, Mate, LXQE, LXDE, XFCE, or you could have it just as like a server-based operating system running things like Air, Sonic, Subsonic, Real VNC, XRDP, Air, AirPlay, Plex, and it Mumble, Murmur, and it just keeps going on and on and on and on. But here's the real gimmick, Bruce. If you go back to dietpie.com and you click on downloads, and this is one thing I've only heard now 2 podcasts mention this. One of them was Nightwise podcast just mentioned this. But like over a year ago, if you go to their download section and you go all the way down, what you'll notice is there's a VMware and there's a VirtualBox version of this. So if you want to, you can literally install this in a VM, get it configured how you want. Inside of DietPie, running DietPie-launcher, you can then, through an ncurses interface, you can do a backup. You can back up your configuration, and then you can basically put this on a Raspberry Pi, hit DietPie-launcher, and do a restoration, and you have everything exactly how you want it configured, and away you go. And it also has native PC and UEFI installs. So if you want to install this on bare metal desktops or laptops or beige boxes or old computers, if you want, you can basically get the exact same functionality out of that kind of computer, and then again do a DietPie backup, put it on a Raspberry Pi 4 and do a restore, or a Raspberry Pi 3 or 2 or whatever, and restore that exact application ecosystem with very, very little issues. This to me is one of the best playground ecosystems I think I've ever seen, Bruce.
You know, I gotta tell you, this is one of the things where when you hang out with somebody long enough, I am literally right on the page and I'm looking at VirtualBox as you mention it. That's hilarious and scary.
Well, you know, it is what it is. It even has Hyper-V from Microsoft support. And then just as a really quick tangent, the Raspberry Pi 4 with 4 gigs of RAM is a very functional device. Okay, I will say that. The community support, second to none. But if you just look up above where it says VMware and native, you'll see 2 boards there that are honestly really, really impressive. One is the Rock 64, one is the Rock Pro 64. Both of them have what's called an RK3399 processor, which is almost insane how powerful it is, but how affordable it is. The Rock 64 is, I want to say, $55, which is like $4 more than the Raspberry Pi. The Rock Pro 64 also has a full slot for even graphics cards kind of thing you can fit in this thing. These mini boards are a little bit crazy. As I want to say, it has a PCIe 4X slot on it. And what you can do with DietPie, I will say, is anything you can think of.
So the question is buy off of this site?
Sorry?
Can I buy these boards right off the site?
No. You can go and see, and I do see you are thinking, I'll say the right way, Bruce. You come here, you can install this on an x86 board. You can find out what you like about it. You can come back here. You can see the downloads, and then you can get the names of boards you like and then research and buy them. I will say inside the United States, one of my favorite websites to go to is Ameridroid, Ameridroide. They are the official U.S. distributor for more than a couple of these mini computers, and their shipping is literally like 2 to 3 days. They're so quick. I'll say this to you and to any listener out there: if you want to buy one of these single board computers and you don't know where to buy it from, don't hesitate. Shoot me an email and I'll tell you where my best experience has been, because I've bought, everything from like the Friendly Arm computers from Korea, the Raspberry Pis, the Rock 64s, the Pine 64s, the Ups boards. I mean, I bought so many of them. I know where to buy them from.
Oh, make sure this link definitely makes it into the note. This is an awesome site.
Yeah, and it's without sounding dumb, it's a very mature ecosystem because it's backboned by Debian. A lot of people, I'll say this, more than a couple of people I know besmirch the fact that this is Debian based. And why can't it be RPM based? Well, because Debian is completely free and open, and by Debian standard, for you to be involved in any official Debian package, your package has to compile for something like 20 different chipset architectures. They're the only distribution that has that in their like bylaws. So if you can compile something for a genuine Fedora based system, it only needs to be compilable on like x86 and that's it. With Debian, they do things a little differently.
Well, it goes back to the all-inclusive, and that's certainly what they are. This is actually great. I think I just got paid last week, too, so maybe this is what I do for a project in the upcoming weeks.
Well, the best thing about having money is I'll help you spend it. In this country, there's one thing we're good at, it's spending money. Another link I want to talk about really quick, Bruce, because I know we've been going a little bit. It was a couple down from Beta News. It basically said, sorry, Microsoft, but your Edge browser will never be installed on my Linux computer. Are you aware what's going on with the Microsoft Edge browser?
No.
Well, the long story short is a couple years ago, they admitted IE was completely garbage and we need to get rid of it. Okay. So then they said, we're going to come up with this new browser called Edge. And, they broke some things. They didn't go with some standards and they have their browser and it kind of works. And then they had to retrofit a lot of stuff in. And then they had to make sure that it was compatible. And then they finally, just about 4 or 5 months ago, decided, okay, we're just going to throw the entire engine away and get rid of it. And then we're going to rebase a new browser based upon Chromium. So now, moving forward, the official browser installed in Microsoft operating systems is going to be a Chromium-based browser called Edge. I will say the number of installs of Chrome on Windows computers is so insane. This to me is like the only way that they can try to stop the bleeding, if you will, by doing this, because if it is, Chromium based and they don't break a lot of things, I can see people having a Microsoft operating systems and just being okay with the default browser.
Well, I think go ahead, I'm sorry.
No, as I was saying, sorry. And one of the things Microsoft did say early when they made this announcement was they would also make sure that this Edge browser would be available for Windows, Mac, and Linux installs.
Well, good luck with that. My problem that I had, all right. All right, let's start off with Edge. So in my last position where I was managing deployment team. Our bare metal image brings down Edge by default. And what was really interesting is that a majority of our customers do not use IE because we gave up on that a long time ago. It couldn't even conform to the web standards for our applications. So, all of our customers were encouraged to use Chrome or Firefox. Firefox actually has been the long stand, browser here. Interestingly enough, what happened this time around is that with Windows 10, because Edge is the primary default browser, what was interesting is that only to confirm what we already knew is that when folks tried to access their applications, because when they tried to bring up some of their old bookmarks, it just simply does not work today for us. And I don't understand why for something so simple, Microsoft still just butchers a browser. And if they want to make it to be all things to everyone, they really need to do a better job at this. I don't know what their goals are at this point. I do know that it's based a fee base for Office, and down the road, I know they have their sights set on also charging us for the OS down the road as well, but browser is something that I just think they need to abandon at this point. It's a useless, worthless product.
Well, I'll agree with you, and I think that's almost what this is look, we'll just use the Chromium base and we'll just put a little interface on top of it, and then we're done. We're not going to do any more work. I will say Microsoft understands a couple things. One, they understand that Azure is going to be a good way for them to make money. They also understand Office 365 occurring subscriptions is another way to make them money. And I actually had a Microsoft employee tell me about a week and a half ago, the reason why everyone likes a monthly subscription model or a yearly or whatever the model is, as far as the investors are concerned, or as far as the board is concerned, every time you sign somebody up, it doesn't matter if it's for $5 a month or $50 a month, they all say it equates to infinite money, because we now have that person as a customer for the rest of their lives unless we mess it up. So it almost doesn't matter how much they charge, as long as they can get people to sign up to give us future money. He said Microsoft believes future money is 10 times more important than whatever money we got today. And I'll say this, last week they announced it's now open to where you can get Visual Studio IDE inside of a browser. The long and the short of it is, Bruce, I will say this. There are versions of Visual Studio Professional, not Enterprise, because I believe Professional is one higher, that literally cost $6,000 a month per seat. Subscription models are where these companies really want to position everything that they do.
Well, I'm not going to dump all over Visual Studios because I actually like it. But I'm not paying for the pro version either. I actually installed it the other day just to see what it would look like as a Python compiler, and yeah. I don't have anything bad to say about it. It's slick, actually. So I'll leave you with that. I have to be. Let's face it. We also have to be honest in what our assessments are of it. And if this is one of the few things that works, I have to say it works. I don't like Microsoft, and but I mean, let's face it. I work in an environment that doesn't give me a choice.
Right. Well, I have to ask you, which version of Visual Studio did you install?
This is just the basic one that's available. Actually, it's even in the repository.
Well, yeah, because there's Visual Studio Code, Visual Studio Community, Video Studio, and then the year. Then there's Visual Studio Enterprise, Visual Studio Professional. There's literally like 6 versions, which is why I think they want to go to this browser-based version that can basically condense them all to just one.
Yeah. Well, I'm guessing it's some kind of community version, but again, I'll circle back with that one.
Well, Visual Studio Code, I'll say this, when you load up Visual Studio Code, the biggest difference to me is on the left-hand side, you have basically buttons right there that are bigger than your normal kind of thing. It's like a vertical toolbar all the way on the left-hand side, and the very bottom one is like your settings and features and add-ons. That to me is the biggest way to identify the versions. And I equally despise Microsoft. Given the chance, I'm pretty sure I'd drive a van through the front of their building, but I digress. Part of me thinks, you know, how they came into our ecosystem. They contributed code to the Linux kernel. They did all these things to basically wiggle their way into our ecosystems. Why don't we feel equally okay in installing Visual Studio Code, using GitHub to basically infiltrate their systems with our methods, with our morals, with our ethics? I think we have to become more comfortable with doing that back to them.
Actually, there's an article that addresses that. There was an interview with Torvalds roughly 3 weeks ago, I believe, and they were talking about the future and what they see with the partnership of Microsoft and Linux. And a lot of the developers for the kernel have no concerns whatsoever about Microsoft invading. In fact, if anything, it's Microsoft that has to watch out, because it's ultimately them who actually stand the risk of being consumed by Linux code. So I'll be curious. Obviously, I made a statement I'm going to have to back up, so I'll have to find that.
Well, and I'll say this, part of me believes when Linus says things, half of it is things that he like believes was happening, but half of it I believe are things that he wants to happen. Like he said, like about 4 or 5 months ago, you know, the reason why x86 is ruling everywhere, including the server room, is because when developers develop, they develop on x86 computers. And which he's right, but I think part of the reason he said that was to challenge people to come out with ARM-based ecosystems that you could develop on. But he didn't want to say it like that because, you know, he just wanted to say, look, the reason why ARM is losing is because you can't develop on it. Now we have things like the Pinebook Pro. We're getting stuff like the Pine Tab. Microsoft literally has computers that have ARM-based processors. I think, you know, part of it is he's trying to dictate what the future will be, and part of it is just like warning people what it could be.
I think that's an acceptable answer. And I'm thinking about, as we're talking about this, why folks actually don't use more Linux machines at work, because especially developers, I know that they're usually presented with a MacBook for such things. But, when the day is done, I think what has to happen here is that a lot of IT shops have to start getting on board with assisting with Linux. And I know it's fear of the unknown, which is one of the reasons why they don't support it. In fact, the university I work with made a conscious decision 3 years ago to no longer make Linux available to the students. And that's just dumb. Because there are so many Linux OSs out there that could easily, fit a student's needs easily. And we've discussed them all
Yeah, I'll say at my job, I believe developers don't use Linux because they can't deploy to Linux. They have to deploy to Windows, and I think it's like, dare I say, trickle down. If all of our servers that we're deploying to are Windows, well, then we should develop on Windows as well. And I'd say my place has taken that so like like almost violently down. Was at one point in time they said, look, all of our production computers out in the field have this display resolution. All of our developers workstations need to have that same display resolution, which meant that none of our developers could even have dual monitors, one with high resolution, one with low, to develop on, kind of thing. All of our developers had to develop on the same resolution that all of their customers were using, which I'm sure made development like 10 times more painful.
Oh, holy cow. Because there's only one size of screen, right?
Well, I will say it's painfully obvious that decision was made by someone who really doesn't understand how computers work.
And that would have been awesome if he had, maybe like a 29-inch screen while everybody else had like a 12.
Yeah, it was definitely pretty bad. Well, we've been going on for about an hour now, Bruce. Is there anything that you want to bring up?
Actually, I'm very curious on the one that you had IRC for DMs.
I will say that one caught me off guard just a little bit. And basically what it is, we have all these different tools out there. We have all these different ecosystems out there. And he basically like gives like a rundown on the different types of applications. What are the pluses and minuses to them? WhatsApp, Signal, Telegram, Matrix, Riot, Slack, Delta Chat, Discord, on and on and on and on. And what he basically was like, I don't understand why we're all just not using IRC and private messages back and forth for DMs. It's obviously from a nerd's perspective. The main reason I wanted to bookmark this was because I still haven't had a chance to try Matrix or Riot. Matrix is used in certain Department of Defense, Homeland Security infrastructures and NSA infrastructures because of its security, is what I'm going to say. It's insane level of security. But I was actually not had a chance to use it, and I was discouraged by their use of Riot. Said that it was slow, and at times messages would not send, and at times messages would not be received. If there's ever a killer in these kinds of messaging apps that will make you not use them, is literally if you have to type a message and it doesn't send, why the hell are you using the messaging application? I will say there is a simplicity and elegance to IRC. There's a reason it's still around. There's a reason it's still used. There's a reason, like, it's stable. It just works. I will say I like IRC. I wish I had more time to devote to actually communicating with people, but yeah, they're gonna keep using it.
Well, I love IRC. I just wish that, the community could be a little bit more active. At work, we use Slack, and I actually enjoy Slack a lot. They're trying to force Teams on us, but luckily our CIO is not on board with it, so we actually get the choice, Slack or Teams. So needless to say, Slack will win hands down for me. But do you tend to have IRC on during work?
No, to be honest. The main reason I can't have IRC on is the same reason I can't be on Twitter. I cannot be a part of a thing that moves at a speed where I'll miss things. I have to read everything. So with like IRC, with Aug Cast Planet kind of channel, I can't be in the channel. at all, because if I miss what's being said, I will like have a nervous breakdown kind of thing. So all the chats that I'm in are so slow. It's literally insane, Bruce, is what I'm gonna say. I use Teams on a daily basis because I have to. Slack is beautified IRC essentially with some integrations in with other applications. I'm not a fan of chat applications, is what I'll say. But I use whatever other people use, because the hardest thing with all these applications is to get people who aren't in them in them. So you always got to go where other people are.
Oh yeah, yep. Huh. All right. Well, that's. I guess that's all I needed to away from that.
Yeah, I will say I still, after all these years, I still have not set up the proper IRC ecosystem, which is I have my server running at home connected to IRC, and then I use other applications to remote into that session so I never have to miss things, and I can be notified if someone says my names kind of thing. I don't know if I ever will do that kind of setup, but I will say it does seem more and more tempting as time goes on.
Yeah, well, one of the great things about Slack is that actually is a notification you can set on the application that when you're mentioned in a conversation, you're actually notified immediately.
That's a double-edged sword. I'll just say that.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it is. All right. Well, I think we've had a good round today.
Absolutely. I will say to everyone again, if you want to send us an email, podcast at Linux for the rest of us, I will say Rain brought up an issue where if you don't come from a truly trusted domain, you might have an issue sending us an email. Rain actually pinged me on Reddit in a private message and just asked, is there another way I can send you an email? If you have an issue sending an email, you can do one of like three things. You can go to podnuts.com, click on contact us. Emails through there will almost always come through. So that's one way to do it. You can try to contact me on other platforms. That's another way to do it. Or you can send me an email at doorgeek@gmail.com and just put in the subject line podcast at Linux for the rest of us. And I know who the email is supposed to go to. Also, don't forget, if you want to send us a voicemail, it's very easy to send us a voicemail. You can either call up 707-6-PODNUT, or you can literally just record audio on your computer, laptop, phone, tablet, or anything, and just send us that in. We can play them live on the show. This was broadcast, I'll say, on YouTube, youtube.com/Linux for the rest of us. Do you have any parting words for everyone, Bruce?
No, I don't. I mean, have a great week. I think we're, like I said, we're entering the food eating season. So hopefully we have some recipes for next week too.
Oh yeah, my wife thinks I'm kidding when I tell her when I retire from my 9 to 5, which is about 6 years away from now, I literally might take cooking chef type classes and like open up some kind of service. I don't want to say restaurant, but some kind of service where I cook. And she thinks I'm kidding, and I'm not.
Oh, tell me it's breakfast place, because that's exactly what I'm going to do. I'm sick of food around here.
Yeah, man, breakfast food, I'll say this, is the easiest not to mess up and the most you just literally just put cheese on it and everyone loves it.
Absolutely. And make sure you use the real bacon, not any of that fair see-through stuff.
That and plenty of butter.
Exactly.
Very cool, very cool. Thank you very much, Bruce. We will talk to everyone again in about a week, and I beg everyone to never, ever, ever forget, whether it's a KaiOS phone, whether it's a Purism phone, or whether it's a laptop that you got from a thrift store, if you do not have root, you really, really do not know who does. Thanks, everyone. We'll talk to you again real soon.